So now I'm going to hand things over to our presenters. We have Nikki Anderson, Quality Enhancement Specialist. We have Kristen Bauman, Partner Engagement Coordinator, and Elizabeth Seitz, Director of Organizational Excellence. They're going to tell you all about exploring what really matters during Stakeholder Day. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Seth, for introducing us. So what we're going to be talking about today is Stakeholder Day. And as you know, CQL is really invested in making sure that everybody has a voice where they belong in things. So some of the benefits of CQL look at accreditation through the lens of how it affects everybody within the organization. So next slide, please. All right, so CQL, our vision is a world of dignity, opportunity, and community for all people. Our mission is that CQL is dedicated to the definition, measurement, and improvement of personal quality of life. All right, so as we were talking about before, the CQL accreditation values and benefits, positive impact on people is a really important one. It can be a really great thing for organizational transformation, for improving services, looking with external validation, and strategic planning, which is a big part of Stakeholder Day and what we're going to be talking about today. All right. So these are some of the organizations which are accredited. There are more than 500 organizations which have achieved CQL accreditation in 25 states in the US. That includes Canada as well, and Ireland outside of the country. If you want to see this really cool map, it is found on our website. So please check that out as well. All right, so let's get into the what and why. So Elizabeth, Nikki, and I, we've had many years as quality enhancement specialists with experience within the realm of CQL Stakeholder Day. We work with lots of organizations, whether they be big, supporting thousands of people, or small, even one or two people. We've worked with newer organizations and those who have been around for decades, rural and urban, and all types of services and stakeholders. So when we talk about Stakeholder Day, and we're going to get way more in depth, tends to be a lot of fun for us and ideally for organizations as well, and a strong, really positive memory for the people participating. A lot of times we get into this day-to-day, what we're always doing, and Stakeholder Day is a really unique time to take a step back and do something other than kind of the usual work. And it's a time to think creatively and critically as a group with a formal, tangible outcome at the end of the day. So this session around Stakeholder Day is really meant to be practical, engaging, and focused on the real-life application. As Seth said, we'll have a question and answer at the end. However, CQL is always available if you have questions. So feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. We're going to highlight the why behind Stakeholder Day and how to really maximize the impact that it will have on your organization for years to come. All right, so I guess it's a good idea to start by defining what is a stakeholder. Interestingly, the term stakeholder originated a long time ago in the 1700s, and was the person who was in charge of holding the bet, right? So if there was a bet, they would hold the kitty. So then they would be the stakeholder, which makes sense. And then in the 1800s, there was this stakeholder theory developed. And it basically says that to be successful, businesses should consider the interests of all affected parties, not just the shareholders. So really a stakeholder is any person, group, or organization which is affected by or able to affect a project, policy, or a business. So even when you think of your own lives, you're probably stakeholders of many organizations. So again, this is how we'll be looking at that term stakeholder. It's the people who have an investment to the organization and are affected by it, or again, can affect it. So we're going to encourage you throughout this whole webinar to think about who are the true stakeholders in your organization who would benefit from it going well. Again, think big, right? So who has a stake? And the stake could be familial, could be financial, philosophical, historical, and who stands to really personally benefit from your organization doing well. So oftentimes, interestingly, organizations aren't really, don't think that they have many stakeholders. But in reality, they tend to have a lot of people who are invested and really truly want to be involved. Even in smaller or more rural organizations, there's a lot of people who are actively invested in the success of the organization for various reasons. Some of the stakeholders that we've seen that are really awesome within these stakeholder day activities are self-advocates. Obviously, they're the most important because they are the ones who stand to benefit a great deal from organizational success. Community partners is a big one. Obviously, family members, board members, donors to the organization. We've seen town government officials, community business leaders, clergy, thought leaders. So really thinking broadly, beyond the people who are typically the usual champions, right? So this is thinking, casting a big net of truly who are the stakeholders within the organization. So that's a little bit about who stakeholders are, but what is a stakeholder day? The official purpose is really bringing a diverse group of stakeholders together to participate in a vibrant planning session, okay? And through this planning session, the stakeholders establish action steps to enhance quality in meaningful ways. All right, so it's really an all-day event to discover, collaborate, dream, and celebrate. And it brings together diverse voices and experiences. So all of those stakeholders that you invite have all had different experiences in their lives. And so that's why it's so great to have that collaboration as well. So within the accreditation process, Stakeholder Day is a key component of the person-centered excellence accreditation, as well as the person-centered excellence with distinction accreditation. So those are the levels beyond the quality assurances accreditation. Quality assurance accreditation does not include a formal stakeholder day. However, CQL really recommends and thinks that having stakeholders involved in every level of your accreditation is something awesome that you could do to have people involved. But this is going to be focused on that stakeholder day. So typically within the person-centered excellence accreditation, the visit one, it is the third day, okay? So that Thursday typically, and then it's the fourth day of the PCED visit. Stakeholder day can be virtual or it can be in person. However, we do not recommend hybrid for reasons that I'm sure you can understand. It just works better when it's all one way or the other. Virtual, we've seen a lot of success. It is a fantastic option for larger organizations or organizations who are more spread out. If you do decide to do the virtual type of accreditation, we would recommend that everybody be on their own devices, have the correct Zoom link and Zoom updates, all of that. It's really important to point out and to note that Stakeholder Day is not a presentation to stakeholders. This is an interactive conversation where you're expecting reciprocity and collaboration. All right. So again, it occurs near the end of the accreditation visit. However, it's really not the end, right? It's a launch point, and it is really the beginning. Is how we like to look at it. And the goal again is to reflect, align, and prioritize what really matters moving forward. Again, from that diverse group of people who are invested within the organization. It sets the tone for true transparency and shared ownership. Everybody is on an equal playing field and has their own plan of what they would like the organization to work on. And that is a really magical thing. All right, so prior to the stakeholder day and prior to the accreditation, you'll be provided with an agenda for the day. And this is something that has timeframes on it. However, it can be really flexible and we can really collaborate with what timeframes work best for your stakeholders. Sometimes people need to just come in the morning, vote for the priority areas, and then leave after. But this agenda is meant to be shared with people that you're asking to attend, again, so that they can have a clear idea of what to expect and also what is expected of them. All right. So the core components of Stakeholder Day are discovery, designing, and dreaming. So discovery, again, is that conversation, collaboration, and really focusing on the things that group wants to work on. The dreaming component is focused on what really matters for the organization. And again, it's that snapshot in time, that stakeholder day with the people who are at the heart of the organization within that moment. Designing will look at how can everybody work together to realistically make these dreams happen. Again, this strategically takes place at the end or during the accreditation week when already the organization is working on reflecting and growing and reimagining its future. So this is just a really great way to enhance that when it's already such an exciting time. Right. Why Stakeholder Day matters. I think already you can already anticipate why it matters, but this is where the engagement becomes investment, right? So important. People are taking their time. Sometimes people take off from work. Sometimes people take off, from being with their families. But they are investing their time, their efforts. And when people are actively invested in creating something, they are much more likely to support it. Again, it brings everyone to an equal table, that transparency aspect, and it creates a culture of respect for diverse viewpoints. It builds trust by showing openness and willingness to listen, to really, really listen in small groups and large groups, and really to validate different experiences and viewpoints and goals. It reinforces a person centered culture, not just in words, but in action. It aligns organizational priorities with real experiences and needs. And my favorite thing is that participants really like to get together and hang out and spend time together and collaborate. There's a really high level of camaraderie that happens. And we've seen it lead to lasting friendships and connections and collaborations that go way past the day itself. So that's always really, really exciting to see. All right. So CQL's role. You are not alone as an organization to plan your whole stakeholder day. So as a CQL staff member, they will help you in organizing and preparation. So yeah. So take a deep breath. That's not just all on you. One of the things that they'll do during the stakeholder day is provide a summary of the findings from the accreditation visit. Again, CQL uses appreciative inquiry, a really transparent, strength-based overview of what was kind of seen, which is really helpful. And it also highlights the unique strengths of what is working really well and should be celebrated. Okay. CQL will also work on making sure that the focus is on what really matters. CQL will assist with transitioning into opportunities for growth, also without assigning blame, which is really, really important to point out. Again, part of that appreciative inquiry is finding pockets of excellence and seeing how they can be reimagined in other areas. We talked a little bit about small and large group discussions to gather input. So CQL will help you all facilitate that in person or in breakout rooms if it is a virtual option. They will guide participants to the key areas and really end with identifying initial goals and directions. And really, I think one of the most important things is to keep the mood light. CQL will try to keep it fun and light, and that people are really getting a lot out of that. So yeah, so that's the role. And also, it's a great time if people have questions and want resources. That CQL is a great resource for questions around true data-driven international best practices. All right, now we're going to talk about the benefits and outcomes.
Hey, thank you, Kristen. Lots of great information already being shared about Stakeholder Day. Like Kristen said, Nikki, myself, and Kristen have a lot of experience in facilitating Stakeholder Days and supporting organizations. And I know for many of us, Stakeholder Day is always a lot of fun. It's a lot of just learning and, like we said, discovering and dreaming. So, of course, there are lots of benefits and outcomes that happen as a result of Stakeholder Day. So, the first and most important thing, and what I think is the biggest benefit to Stakeholder Day, is that it is really a time to stop for a moment and celebrate the organization's hard work. This is what we often see as not happening like it should, even for a short moment, is the organization celebrating its successes as a team. Providers work so hard day in and day out that they sometimes forget just to take a breath and recharge. And Stakeholder Day is a really great time to do that. And we love to celebrate that with our partners. Next, Stakeholder Day allows for a variety of organizational members and other stakeholders to share their perceptions of the organization's work and share ideas for continuous quality improvement. These ideas then contribute to more thorough, clear priorities for the organization. Ideas that might otherwise have never been thought of or even maybe considered. So, really cool to have all stakeholders together with different perceptions. And with stakeholders informing priorities, this leads to increased buy-in on those priorities, the goals, and the action steps created as part of the day. So when a diverse representation of positions and departments and external members are involved in the process, then those individuals are more likely to champion the ideas and actions they were a part of developing. Additionally, your staff, your people receiving services, can talk with their peers that did not attend or weren't heavily involved in the accreditation week to really understand the priorities and the goals and the actions and the why behind them. They can then advocate for those ideas and be those on the ground cheerleaders for change. Another benefit to Stakeholder Day is that it can lead to stronger, clear alignment between policy, practice, and outcomes. In the work we do at CQL, we often find practices and policies that are not aligned. The policy might say one thing, but something different is happening in practice. And this happens for any number of reasons. But when this is the case, it's difficult for outcomes to then be aligned as well. So, with the way Stakeholder Day is set up, it allows for a lot of collaborative group work. And this is often where gaps can be identified between system, practice, and outcomes. Then once those gaps are identified, then priorities can be developed to help close those gaps and align them with defined outcomes. All of this leads to a roadmap for person-centered excellence planning. The intention of any priorities and actions developed during Stakeholder Day is that it leads to better, stronger, person-centered, and person-directed services, which of course go above and beyond compliance and regulatory requirements. Person-centered excellence is about the best practices within an organization. It's about the best practices that CQL sees and can bring from all the partners that it has to help other partners enhance their services. The energy and work done during this day, particularly, really excites momentum for change and for growth. So, the tangible outcome from the day is really the development of short-term action plans. And if you can see the slide, this is what that action plan document looks like. Typically, there are 3 of these that are developed as part of the day. One from each of the top 3 vote-getting factor areas, which is a key component of the day, is for all the stakeholders to share information, to gather information, to assess the information, to let it sink in, and then to determine of the 8 areas of the focus of the day, what are the 3 areas we'd really like to see the organization work on? So, then, when the vote getting, if you will, is done and the votes are all tallied and the 3 top vote getting areas are pulled out, the afternoon groups, there are 3 of those in total, each take one of those areas and discuss what the dream is for that area. They talk about why it's important to the organization. and what actions might be taken to achieve the ultimate dream or outcome related to that area. So the afternoon stakeholder groups developed the first draft of these plans, utilizing this template kind of as the end goal for the organization, and then the information is shared at the very end of stakeholder day. So the idea is that there is kind of an assignment, if you will. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of designing and dreaming, like we talked about it. And at the end of the day, the assignment is to come out of there with some of these short-term plans, the first iteration developed. Ultimately, those plans often will see several drafts before a finalized version is sent back to CQL as part of the Accreditation Partnership Agreement. These plans, so we're going to take these plans and we're going to ensure that there's momentum. So these plans are then reviewed during the second check-in visit with CQL, which is typically around 12 to 18 months after this first visit. And then long-term plans are developed at that time from these based on achievements or maybe even some struggles that have occurred within the organization. The long-term plans are reviewed then at the third check-in with CQL at the 36-month mark or the 3-year mark within this 4-year accreditation term. So CQL is there in its partnership to support and to guide and provide any kind of resources to the organization in order to keep these dreams moving forward to fruition. So let's get into what I think is the most fun part, and that's actually preparing for a really successful stakeholder day. The success of this day really depends largely on the planning, the organization, and the engagement of the provider. So even the little details are important here because they can help really build a successful day. So it really starts with the stakeholders themselves. And remember who Kristen spoke about at the beginning of today's webinar. Who are those stakeholders? Okay. Like Kristen said, this could be anybody that has a stake in the organization. So definitely the people that you support, your direct support staff, your job coaches, your supervisors, managers, leaders within the organization, family members, it could be board members, community members, it could be external regulatory bodies or case management entities, whoever has an investment in the organization being the best that it can be. So when you think about your stakeholder day, you want to, number one, be intentional about who's invited, because a diversity of voices really matters, and those voices should represent a holistic view of the organization. Now, it doesn't always or just have to be your biggest cheerleaders, if you will, but it should also include maybe some people that are maybe a little more cynical, because all perspectives are important, okay? Not just the ones that are like I said, the biggest cheerleaders. You need that well-rounded, holistic view of your organization. When you think about numbers, how many people should we invite? We like to say the sweet spot, if you will, is around 30 to 50 attendees. And we base that on what we've seen over time. The fact of the groups that are going to be utilized during the day. You really want engagement from everyone. Now, this is not saying that less people doesn't work, because we've certainly held stakeholder days with 10 people. And we are very flexible. We will pivot, and CQL will do whatever we can to help make that successful. We've also been successful with more than 50 people. But what we would caution organizations is not to start getting too far over 50. Once you start getting to 70, 80, 100, 150, and I even had an organization I had to talk down from about 250 people at one time. Um, Too many people can actually hinder full participation from everyone. And the point of inviting that diverse group of stakeholders is to ensure that we get meaningful engagement from everyone that's invited. So 30 to 50 people is what we recommend, but that is something that, we can look at and make work if it's just outside of those numbers. So, and if people can only attend part of the day, we always recommend to have them come in the morning. We understand it's a big investment to take time out of your day from, typically 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. To come spend the day with somebody else, especially if you're working full time, you have kids, whatever it might be. So, if someone wants to be engaged, they want to attend, but they can only come for part of the day, we often suggest have them come in the morning, stay up until lunch, because that's where a lot of the energy is a lot of the learning and the designing and the engaging with others happens in the morning. So have people come in the morning if they can only attend part of the day. What we would recommend is with all of your stakeholders, you'll want to give them plenty of notice about the event. You're more likely to have more engagement, more people be able to attend, the more notice that they have about the event. Something that you could consider sending is maybe a save the date. As soon as you know the dates of your accreditation visit, you could send a specific, an email invite or something that specifically asks people to save this day on their calendars with more information to come soon. So within that save the date, you could share with those invited why the day's important. If they understand the why, they might be more likely to actually put it on their calendar. So why is the day important to the organization and what the purpose of the day is and why it's important to the provider that they get feedback and engagement from their stakeholders. You can also use information if people want more information about the day. You can use the great information from this webinar if you want to share it, or our CQL website. We have good information on there as well that you can direct people to. Or you could do something like a QR code on that save the date or a phone number. And if people have more questions about the day, they can reach out to someone regarding more information. What you'll want to do as well is identify what supports or accommodations that different attendees might need to attend and be the most engaged. This might include things such as transportation. Maybe people want to come, it's just difficult or expensive to get there. So is there a way that they could get a ride, or you could set up a ride service or provide transportation to the day? If people might need a personal assistant, someone that's there to help them with any kind of needs that they would have throughout a day to attend. Larger spaces around tables. Just if you have people that have any kind of mobility needs or concerns, make sure that there's plenty of room for people to move around and freely engage with others. Interpreters, and this could be any kind of interpreter that someone might need. If someone needs one of those, ensure that those are available for people. It could also be something like modified lighting. If bright light, is overstimulating to someone, think about how the lighting may be where you're going to have the stakeholder day. Could be modified. And then with that, any other sensory modifications that might be needed for someone to fully engage. That's something you'll definitely want to think about, is where you're going to have the event. A lot of times that would determine, how many people you can invite, or perhaps it might be the other way around. You want to invite so many people and you maybe don't have the space within your own organizationally owned building. So you can think of a partner that you have within the community that you might be able to host the stakeholder day there. But think about the accommodations that you will need when choosing that location. Accommodations are just one way an organization can create a welcoming environment, but people also have to feel emotionally safe as well to share their honest thoughts and opinions. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about this here soon. So, but this all starts really with CQL staff and organizational leadership, modeling patience and openness for everyone to see that this is a safe environment for people to be able to share their opinions and their thoughts and their perceptions about what they see within the organization. Another simple but important tip for a successful day is to have all the day's handouts printed and organized for attendees when they arrive. There's nothing truly more stressful than waiting until the last minute to find, to print, and to organize all this information. And these are all things that CQL sends very far in advance, honestly, of the accreditation visit. So you will already have all that information to be able to print and organize and get ready for the day. Another small but really impactful thing to consider is the preparation of a seating chart or assigned tables. This really helps to have a diverse set of stakeholders at each table, especially for each morning group. Now, there are, 8 prearranged groups, if you will, in the morning, which each has an assigned factor, and there are 8 factors in mind for that group work. But it really does save a lot of time that day if those groups are prearranged. So think about it as planning a wedding without all the extra heartache and headaches of a wedding. So if you know that you're going to have 8 groups in the morning, which is what we do as part of the morning activities, you can think, how can I set up these 8 groups? Take a look at who your stakeholders are, who's coming, and then think, how can I divide up these people into 8 groups in a way that provides diversity within each of the groups, that in a way that's going to provide a really great perspective within each of those groups. Those are the things that you should think about as you're kind of designing and determining how to organize your groups. And honestly, another easy thing is having just each group assigned a number and then having those numbers on the table again, kind of like what you would see from a wedding reception. And then everything is all organized, ready to go. People can come in. They will know what table they're at. And then when we're breaking up for the groups in the morning, it's easy to coordinate the different factors based on what factor number they are with the number of each table. Okay. Another small task is to ensure that any and all technology needed for the day is available and it's working. It might include things such as projectors, screens, make sure the sound is working, laptops, and microphones. Now, CQL will always be there early on that day to use their laptop if that's something that's needed, or have the presentation on a flash drive. But we always, whoever is facilitating, will always get there a little bit early just to make sure that everything is working on our end as well. So it's with that important to collaborate with your CQL staff in advance of the day if there's specific areas that you want to focus on. So while the PowerPoint is very much kind of CQL and information driven from the week, if an organization wants to say share progress from strategic or accreditation goals over the last few years, we're more than happy to include that information into the presentation. That could be as simple as an organization, you developing some PowerPoints, and then we can just put those right into the presentation so that as a group you can share progress and celebrate successes that you've achieved. Uh, if there's other types of celebration that the organization wants to talk about as well, we're more than happy to share in celebrations with our partners. It could be, maybe somebody's retiring, maybe somebody new came onto the team, maybe somebody accomplished an important personal goal. Maybe someone's, celebrating a tenure. Maybe someone just had a baby, whatever it is. CQL loves to celebrate with providers. So we're more than happy to do that during that day as well. Just let us know. And then the one that we get asked about more frequently than the other two things is aligning the work of the day with the organization's strategic plan. So, if, as an organization, you're kind of in your strategic planning phase, we are more than happy to get a copy of that strategic plan that you're working on in advance and seeing how we can't align the information in the PowerPoint with those strategic plan areas so we can help guide participants to those areas so that goals developed from Stakeholder Day kind of align within the larger kind of topic areas of your strategic plan. We're more than happy to do that. An important thing to remember, the day is not about problem solving. It's about using appreciative inquiry to discover, to dream, and to design. It's not about all the problems or the struggles. It's not about trying to solve the world's problems, from 9 to 3 that day. It's about celebrating and recognizing successes and the great things that are happening. A successful Stakeholder Day really focuses on the positive, but we'll keep an eye on potential barriers to achieving organizational goals, but our focus is going to be on the positive and the successes and the great things happening within the organization. So the last section that I'm going to talk about is around facilitating meaningful engagement. So we've talked a lot about who to invite and why, along with the tips for a successful day. But we also want to provide some ideas or reminders on how to facilitate meaningful engagement amongst your invited stakeholders. And of course, meaningful engagement is important because really the best ideas emerge when very different perspectives meet. That is the fun part of Stakeholder Day. So, what can we do to facilitate meaningful engagement? Well, like we talked about, consider those seating assignments. You really want to create an environment where different perspectives can be shared during all that group work. The 8 smaller groups in the morning and then the afternoon groups, which there are 3. Right. So you also want to use person-centered facilitation, which is focused on listening, not directing. So the best thing that we can all do is listen to each other, let each other talk, and ensure that people are being heard. And it's important because we want to encourage participation from those quieter voices, not just the dominant ones. So when you're thinking about where people are sitting and at what tables, you probably don't want to put a dominant voice with maybe somebody that's really quiet, unless there's going to be someone to help that quieter person speak up and really encourage them. Otherwise, we would probably say be very careful about who your dominant voices are, as well as being mindful of your power dynamics. So Is there perceived power? Are people going to feel intimidated speaking, say, in front of the CEO or board members or the executive director? So we want to be, you want to be mindful of any type of power dynamic that may exist within your organization. So use strategies too, like small groups or visuals or prompts to support engagement. And this is the most fun when we are doing those small group presentations in the morning. This always seems to be the part where we get people most engaged is when there's stories that are being shared from within the organization, and when there's entertaining group presentations. Capture input in real time. People really want to see their voice reflected. So we use a lot of flip charts and markers. So when people are providing input, note them on those flip charts. Make sure that people can see that their information is being taken seriously. And then, of course, keep bringing people back to the group, the central theme of what really matters. To the person supported, to the organization, to the direct support staff, to families, but what really matters. And then, of course, make it clear that opinions and experiences shared they're valuable, even if they are different from each other's. All opinions and experiences are extremely valuable. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nikki to help us turn input into action.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, so turning input into action for Stakeholder Day. So once you have that feedback, you can go to the next slide, please. Once you have that feedback and that's been gathered, the next step you're going to want to do is align and prioritize what was learned. So a helpful way to do that is kind of by looking at information through the lens of both your basic assurances and the personal outcome measures. This kind of helps identify where stakeholder feedback is going to connect to important quality, rights, health, safety, and those person-centered outcomes. So as you're reviewing that feedback, start thinking about and identifying some of those common themes. That's where you're going to find the patterns, recurring concerns, and those areas that stakeholders are consistently identifying as important. While there may be a lot of ideas generated during Stakeholder Day, we often see organizations sometimes try to address everything at once, and that can be really overwhelming. So we really try to encourage focus on just a few key priorities that are going to have those greatest impact. So once those priorities are identified, this is where they can now be translated into those meaningful goals. So starting by defining the outcomes you hope to achieve, then develop the short-term goals like Liz had talked about, and then that can those realistically be accomplished within those 12 to 18 months? The short-term goals are actually going to serve as building blocks for the longer-term goals that you'll be developing with your organization during your second visit or the visit 2. So by taking that phased approach, organizations are going to be able to demonstrate progress, maintain some of that momentum that they're getting, and create a clear path towards actual improvement. So the goal is to move from feedback to priorities to action. Next slide, please. Okay. So after priorities and goals have been established, now the next step is the action piece, the action planning. So this is where ideas are going to start turning into actual measurable change. So for each priority area, identify specific and actionable steps that can move the organization a little further towards their desired outcomes. So what is that going to look like? How are we going to get there? The more concrete those action steps are, it becomes a little easier to track the progress and maintain that accountability. It's also important to assign ownership. This is kind of a big one. Every action item should have a person, team, or department, so it's not getting lost. Everyone knows their roles, everyone knows their responsibilities. When ownership is finally clearly defined, again, that creates that accountability and a higher likelihood that the plans will be implemented successfully. Timelines are equally as important. So we want to establish realistic target dates, We don't want to overwhelm teams or staff. So ensure that the timelines that you're working with and the action steps line up and they are attainable. So that they can be monitored and adjustments can be made as needed. The final piece to closing the loop with stakeholders is the engagement piece. Stakeholder engagement does not end when the feedback is collected. It continues through communication and transparency. So organizations should share outcomes and provide those updates on what was learned and what actions can be taken as a result of everything you learned during that stakeholder day. It's also important to show stakeholders the impact of their participation. This is where you get people coming back every time you hold one. This is where that participation feels like it is meaningful. So highlighting the changes that have occurred because of their feedback is a great way to do that. So whenever possible, share those measurable results, not just after stakeholder day, but throughout the years, throughout your cycles. Sharing those results, again, really makes the stakeholders feel that their feedback is meaningful and you've actually followed through on some of it. That can look like satisfaction surveys, that can look like newsletters, policy changes, any way that you can reinforce that connection between stakeholder input and organizational improvement. Next slide, please. All right. So as we kind of start wrapping up, I just want to highlight a few lessons learned and considerations for making the stakeholder day really successful. So one of the challenges organizations often face is a lack of follow through once the day is over. The day could be exciting, really fun, filled with a lot of stuff, but it's really important that we keep that momentum going once it's over. So again, a lot of energy, a lot of great ideas, feedback, but the real impact comes from what happens after stakeholder day. So the information gathered really should continue to inform that quality improvement efforts and organizational planning long after the event concludes. It's also really important to avoid tokenism. So people's participation should be meaningful, just not simply checking a box, which can happen. People should see that their voices really are valued, heard, considered when decisions are made. When stakeholders recognize that their input matters, again, that's when the engagement becomes much, much stronger. So that meaningful change really starts with listening. You don't have to have all the answers. And I know that can be a little tough for some organizations, but it's really about creating a space for honest feedback and just willing to learn from what you're being, what's being told. At the same time, you do want to be prepared for differing opinions. We've all experienced that. And not everyone will agree, and that's okay. And that's actually really a strength rather than a barrier. We really want to take those different perspectives and kind of create a complete picture of what's working well and where those opportunities for improvement can exist. Keeping discussions focused, Liz kind of touched on that. So strong facilitation really helps to kind of make sure everyone has a chance to participate, but we remain productive and the group kind of stays aligned with that purpose of the session. Another key point is avoid over-promising. It's really easy to do that, but it's better to set those realistic expectations about what can be addressed and within what time frame. I think stakeholders really start to appreciate the honesty and transparency when commitments can't be fulfilled. Finally, momentum is built through visible action and communication. So even small updates about progress don't have to be anything big. Next steps, decisions that you've made as a result of the stakeholder feedback really help to demonstrate how that participation leads to meaningful outcomes. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, key takeaways. So as we close, I'd like to leave you with a few key takeaways. So first, success of Stakeholder Day really depends on authenticity, inclusion, and follow through. So creating those opportunities for people to really share their perspectives is so important. But the true value really comes from ensuring those voices are genuinely heard and respected and reflected into the future actions of the organization. So throughout the process, it's important to keep the focus on what really matters to people supported at the end of the day. While organizations are often facing competing priorities, stakeholder engagement is most effective when it centers around experiences, the goals, the outcomes that are really meaningful to the people receiving services and supports. It's also worth remembering that change doesn't always have to be large scale. Some meaningful improvements can make a significant difference in people's lives. So sometimes the most valuable outcomes come from addressing just everyday issues that matter deeply to people. Finally, don't underestimate the importance of expressing gratitude. This is a big one. Thank your participants for sharing their time. It is a big commitment, like Liz had talked about. It is a lot to take out of their day. So we really want to make sure that that is recognized, and we're really sharing our perspectives and our experiences, and thanking them for their willingness to engage in what makes the process really meaningful and successful. So as you move forward, provide stakeholders with clear next steps, available resources if they would like them, extra information about how they can continue to stay involved. So again, that ongoing communication helps maintain that trust, strengthen those relationships, and reinforces the stakeholders' input really is a part of that continuous improvement. Next slide. So we like to always leave with this one. It's a great, just kind of, it sums it up. That sums up Stakeholder Day. So Stakeholder Day is not just an event, it truly is a catalyst for transformation. Next, please. Okay. So if you haven't already, we really encourage you to sign up for our CQL emails. Again, this is a great way to just get a lot of the resources that we love to share with our partners. And you can get those right to your inbox into your email. So if you haven't, again, already, sign up for those. Also, make sure that you follow us on social media. The Facebook e-community is just a great place with a lot of our partners sharing stories, success stories, accreditations, resources, just things that they've been doing, and again, really willing to share all of that. And then again, our YouTube and then LinkedIn. And if you have any questions after this webinar, again, we're going to have a Q&A here soon, but if you have any questions, here's our contact information. We're always ready and willing to answer some questions. And now I'm going to hand it off to Seth.
Great, excellent. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. We did get a couple questions in the Q&A. First off, we have, what happens when the priorities identified by organizational stakeholders like leadership or employees don't align with other stakeholders?
I could take this one. It's a good question. You know, and Kristen and Nikki, of course, jump in, but you know, start with finding out the why. You know, what are the stakeholders seeing to form that opinion? Are others seeing the same thing? You know, what's missing are they being misinformed? Maybe it's just information or things that they've heard, but maybe it's not correct information. Are there things that leadership is missing that maybe, say, a family member is consistently seeing, but leadership might be missing? It's really important, I think, to listen and identify if there is a gap. And then again, see if it's just one person's opinion, or others seeing the same thing. And then ultimately, collaboration is the key, and ultimately the highest priorities will take precedence kind of in what the dreams and the goals become. So maybe those other priorities then become the long-term plans built at that second visit, like, you know, Nikki had talked about. So definitely collaborate, but find out the why, I think, is probably the best place to start. So anything else, Seth?
Excellent. Yeah, we can get another one.
Okay.
What can we do to steer Stakeholder Day into being a positive experience? You kind of covered it a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate on it.
I was just say all the above. Everything that we talked about. Personally, from my experience, and I don't want to do all the talking, but get people excited. It all starts with the enthusiasm, as a provider. I mean, we come in enthusiastic about Stakeholder Day, and we enjoy it. We love seeing the organizations, the dynamics, but you have to get people excited about it. Use the day as a celebration, be positive, make it an event. Decorate, have a theme, make it fun. And you can't go wrong with good snacks, honestly. So, have a comfortable space. I think that does make a difference. And really, it just goes back to, helping people feel welcomed and heard. So I don't know, Nikki, Kristen, anything you want to add?
Think it's just really such an interactive day that it's hard not for it to become a really positive experience. It's not just reading a PowerPoint. It's not just, reading from a piece of paper. It's so fun to see how creative organizations get, how creative stakeholders get when they're broken up into their groups. And so it really like it's very infectious. It's hard to not kind of just get that feeling and that positivity.
Yeah, I think also, Nikki talked about gratitude and how important that is. Just constantly thanking people and letting them know how much their opinion matters, and that how valued they are to even be there. I think that goes a really long way as well for just modeling and creating this positive environment where everybody is welcome. But yeah, great question.
We did get another one in. What are some ways that organizations can share findings from Stakeholder Day with others, maybe those who couldn't attend?
You want me to start? I could start this one too, and then Nikki and Kristen, please jump in. Um, there's lots of different ways you can share. I mean, think about your current methods of communication and how you share information, but you could record different parts of the day, and create a short video to share with everyone, just little highlights, if you will, from Stakeholder Day through pictures or through video. You can add it to a newsletter. You can post, information and pictures on the website or any of your social media. If you have social media, accounts, Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. One way isn't going to work for everyone. So think about using multiple ways, multiple communication methods, for how you share that information. And not just right after either is the important thing. That's when you could share the highlights, but especially if you use a newsletter every so often, put something in there about, hey, as a follow-up or check-in number 1, check-in number 2, whatever it might be. So, Kristen, Nikki?
Oh no,
Yeah,
that
I
was
always
pretty
encourage
good.
people to take lots of pictures because it's really this unique and vibrant time when people who aren't usually together are together and they're collaborating and sometimes they're doing skits or drawing pictures. And it's just really special to have some moments captured from that. And then again, like Liz had said, just sharing them with whomever wants to see. But social media is always a great way to say, like, look what we did, as part of our CQL Stakeholder Day. And really just sharing all that great information. But like Liz also said, revisiting. It's not just a one and done. But it's a process, right? Where it's revisited often and updates are shared and continuing to ensure that everybody is in the loop is so important.
Great, and this one's kind of tied to it. I'm sure the answer will be maybe a little bit similar, but I'll ask it anyway. Teddy asks, any tips for sharing progress on the accreditation plans with stakeholders and others, like longer in the process, weeks, months, later?
Ditto. I think, yeah, everything that we just talked about, those ways that you share, just the highlights of the day, but it's the same way. How do you already share, all this information? Think about the different ways you communicate, for your staff too, if staff don't read your emails, which is something that we, hear every now and then, do, at the different locations or different departments, are there, meetings, department meetings or house meetings or Staff in-service days, those are great days and great times to share information about where you're at. Number one, what are the goals that were developed? Where are we at with those? And then number two, the last part of it is what feedback do people have? So for people that couldn't engage in the week maybe or in the stakeholder day, it still gives them an opportunity to provide input into those things. So
Definitely.
I think it's a good
Thank
opportunity
you.
also to ask stakeholders, how would you like to be continuously kind of updated on what we talked about? How would you like to get some of the news or see where we're at with the goals if they were there or if they weren't there? I think, that's again another place we could get that feedback.
yeah, that's a
Great
good one,
point.
Nikki. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm.
Excellent. Well, we're basically at the top of the hour, so a reminder to all attendees that you'll be receiving an email in a couple of weeks that include all the chat links, the webinar recording, a PDF version of the PowerPoint slides, so be on the lookout for that. Other than that, any final words from our presenters today before we close things out?
I don't think so.
No,
Just
we're all
thank you
good.
so much
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
listening. Yeah, we
absolutely.
really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
So,
Take
bye-bye.
care.
Okay.